We're back, and today we're going to be talking about Boston's surprising win and how that affects the Vancouver Titans.
After that, we'll talk about some of the changes happening to the Spark over in the Asia region, and then dive back into the mailbag that we were supposed to finish last week, but we pushed to this week because there's a lot of mailbag questions.
A lot of mailbag questions. I'm Jane, this is Avast, and welcome to Contested. What's up, guys? Welcome back to your Tuesday edition of Contested. We are, in fact, in the Frontier Communications studio, and if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you might actually believe that. But no, we are still at our respective places of residence. We've just swapped out the green screen so for some pretty fancy backdrops. You know, new shiny. These things are.
They
awesome.
look nice. They look
they're
nice.
nice.
We're very unified between us and Lando now, who didn't have a green screen before. And now Lando has his Envy background too. So I think we're feeling very unified at this point.
These things are also giant. Like, it doesn't, to the viewer, it's going to be the same experience for you, just, a black backdrop instead of green screen. For me, it now takes up about a third of my kitchen. So
I can't even, I'm trapped in between my desk, my PC, and the backdrop because it's the only way to get it properly in the frame. So I have to jump over my PC to exit my setup here if I wanted to while the backdrop is up.
It's also, so when I'm done with having the backdrop, I have to like slide into hallway, and the puppy that we have is absolutely terrified of this thing. He just like barks at it and runs the opposite direction. So you know what? I'm just about ready to actually get back to the Frontier Communications studio. But you know what? Moving on with
in
the
due
show.
time. In
due time. Soon. I think pretty soon. I think I've got
Soon TM.
I had a production date scheduled for like the 29th, so just over a week. So hopefully soon. And then we actually get to have fancy cameras and production, and then more guests on the show as well. That's going to be fun. Definitely want to get more guests on the show. Which, speaking of chat, just a minor side. Would you guys prefer the format where a guest joins us for just an interview, or if the guest joins us for basically the entire show? You have like a 3-host podcast. Give your comments in chat while I start today's 60-second favor recap. Welcome to your favorite 60-second recap. This weekend, the Vancouver Titans' new roster continued to struggle with games against the Houston Outlaws and Philadelphia Fusion, and although they weren't expected to win, the games quickly devolved into their opponents just seemingly able to do whatever they wanted in order to win, including just pressing W, or in the case of Sato, just repeatedly jumping into the backline and massacring the supports. Their chances of even beating the Boston Uprising have also dropped dramatically, as the Uprising beat the Gladiators in a surprising 6 games in order to maintain their all-time match record against the Gladiators, a whole 6 games to 0. It's one of the more ridiculous stats I've heard recently, but I guarantee you it's absolutely real. What caused the match to go the way of Boston was a combination of the Gladiators looking way worse than usual, as well as Boston actually starting to look like a competent and coordinated team with the addition of Punk. But we'll talk more about that later. There were 2 other games this weekend that went to 5 games apiece, as the Guangzhou Charge just barely edged out the Chengdu Hunters in a nail-biter of a map on Oasis, and the Toronto Defiant dropped Ilios against the Los Angeles Valiant in order to secure the 12th spot in the May tournament, which will have them kicking things off in the new and improved Toilet Bowl against the Vancouver Titans this Friday.
Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful. Splendid.
Out of the park.
Resplendent.
Yeah, I'm getting practiced.
Glamorous.
Yeah. I mean, your popping off sections have been fantastic. So gotta up.
Well, I think that also Chad has sort of given us our answer, by the way, for the guest, is that they want him for the entire segment.
That seems awesome.
Which I think that's what we were talking about anyways. That was sort of the direction we were leaning, chat. But we wanted to get confirmation with you because we don't do anything without you guys telling me. Like, I'll forget to breathe if you don't tell me to breathe.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah.
That's how dedicated I am.
It's worse doing pre-recorded shows because we're lost without you, chat. We really are. It's just like doing pre-recorded. We have no metric on how good our segues are or how bad our stories are. It's awful. It's terrible. Really.
10 out of 10. So yeah, we'll probably lean towards, I guess, our guests doing a whole segment, because I think that's something also we could put a lot more spotlight on the guests that we bring on and get a lot more of their opinion, especially since people I saw like within the community that people want to get a lot more spotlight on like coaches and things like that.
Yeah.
And when we bring coaches on, I think when we actually give them a whole interview segment to sort of bring in their own, because also they can give their own ideas and stuff. I think it'll be a lot more interesting to give coaches that time to
I
sort
think
of
one of the
connect.
things that is like most disappointing to me about the pandemic, like COVID-19, is the fact that I had so many things planned up because Dallas was hosting so many homestands. We would have a period of time where there were a lot of members of the Overwatch League
Yes.
actually in person, and we could have recorded in studio, gone like real hard while they were on location, and then kind of released them like piecemeal. Yeah, like
We had so many plans that
so
without the
many
studio,
plans.
like we'd had lack of guests in the studio because we don't have the home stands. We lack the studio for the production value at times, and then also we a nice studio, and then also on top of that we had like all this other content that part that we're going to slot in, and it just gets so hard when you get
Yeah.
when everything gets split up and you go at home. But the important part is that we're still putting on the show, and I think also what's also important is that Boston beat Gladiators this
Easy
week.
10 10 10 10.
That's
we
also
go.
important.
I mean,
We
where do
need to talk about that. We need
Yeah.
to talk about that because it is just, if I'm a Gladiators fan, I'm searching for answers. I'm looking for any and all cult leaders to find me and tell me what went wrong. Why has life turned upside down like this? There were Gladiators that now lost to Boston.
Yeah, they definitely did not look nearly as good as I guess everybody, myself included, fans included, and I was kind of trying to hunt on like social media and I was being a creepy little stalker doing my research and trying to figure out if the Gladiators members had commented about the loss on like their Twitch streams. Even Deepe was kind of just had his more political response. Considering what happened after that dishonest comp.
You would expect after like the Valiant match, right?
Yeah.
There would be outbursts, but I think the pain is too great for them to even say.
Man, the fact that they have player cams now, like the sheer depression on all of those Gladiators members' faces when they lost, and it just swapped to that 6-player cam. Like Birdring just like pushed his camera up.
Cam over.
Somebody just disconnected them. Space just looked like his soul had left his body.
I mean, my soul would leave my body too at this point, because if you think about how, like, I was looking at the current record for the Boston Uprising overall is 2-10.
Yes,
And Gladiators just lost.
It's 2-10 after they beat the Gladiators.
After they beat Glads.
So
yes.
it was 1-10. Like, yeah, it was not like Birdring especially, I think, really struggled. I think, at least from my perspective, I didn't watch the entire thing. I flipped through the maps that I thought were going to be the most interesting to me to try and figure out what was going on. I definitely think Birdring was struggled, and I just saw I saw a comment earlier today. I haven't had a chance to verify it or anything, but is it true that Birdring had a wrist injury recently?
I mean, not recently, but like there was in season 1, in season 2, there was periods of time in particular where, especially season 2, where he wasn't playing, and parts of season 1 where people said it was a wrist injury. Other people have said it might be other things, but like the wrist injury is definitely recent. It's happened in the past couple of years. Like, and also something like that doesn't just go away necessarily.
Yeah.
It could be a lasting issue.
So it wasn't recent though.
It's not like super recent, but it is something that happened in the past.
And then one of the other things that like really surprised me is the Los Angeles Gladiators support line. They were also really quite poor during this match.
Well, they played a lot of Paintbrush Mercy, so it wasn't Shaz Big Goose the entire time.
Yeah. But definitely, like, I guess I just expect more from the Los Angeles Gladiators than that. But on the side of the Boston Uprising, I think that Punk looked fantastic for his debut. Jerry looked great as always. And then Myungbong, I know that I personally have been critical of Myungbong in the past, but they played really, really quite well. And, watching, I think, the Lijiang Tower map in particular, I'm not sure whether it was morale or anything like that, but the Boston Uprising, this wasn't really at the end of the map, really. It wasn't close. Like, Lijiang was not close.
No.
They looked strong and coordinated, and they were working well. Birdring was getting picked, and then OG got picked quite a bit, and they were trying to do the Echo, Reaper, and the Zarya, and then Boston Uprising went with the Torbjorn instead of the Echo, as well as double shields. So they just couldn't really get anything done. And then as soon as they lost that first capture, the Los Angeles Gladiators kept trying to do the same thing over and over again, trying to retake. The Echo had really nothing to work with. So even on Lijiang Tower, not Gardens, yes, Gardens. Like Space had some fantastic plays once they got off the Zarya and went back onto the Sigma. Like there was in one fight where the Echo came out. Yeah, it was Echo, and they duplicated Reinhardt, and Space actually managed to block both shatters
Oh yeah.
with the Sigma shield, which is like
Yeah.
so.
I think the narrative though that we have to talk about is more of like where do we go from this rather than like okay, Boston played great, but is this a one-time thing or does it continue to play great, right? Does this and also what does this just mean Gladiators are boomed? Because also Gladiators have definitely a history, many of the players on it, of being boomers essentially. Not boomers as in like old age, but boomers as in they
Mental boom?
mental boom
Yeah,
constantly. Like
yeah.
so it just becomes like does Gladiators recover from this? Are they now stuck in a state of perma boom? Like what has happened? How do they cover? And is Boston actually on the up and up, or is Gladiator, or is this a one time thing? Because also it can lead back into the do hero pools drastically change the strength and consistency of teams week to week? And if this is one of these solutions, is this one of these cases? Or is this actually just a one-time thing, right? Like,
I definitely don't think I would blame this on hero pools or anything like that. I think it is notable to say that the two maps that the Gladiators lost really bad and they looked the worst on were the two final control maps. Because in this series, Boston Uprising only won on control, so they drew 2 CP. And then the Gladiators won hybrid and escort. So control maps were the only ones that Boston won, and notably maps 5 and 6 went Boston's way. And one of the strengths that I've been talking about the Gladiators pretty much since day one of this season has been their preparation. Even on control maps, I know that Curry Shot is pretty notorious for his meticulous preparation on these maps, and it's entirely possible that they were a little bit less prepared for 5 and 6, especially going against Boston. It's not exactly a situation that you're really expecting yourself to get into, a map 5 to Boston to begin with. So maybe, just the draw on Volskaya was really that unlucky. But in addition to that, the mental boom is entirely there. And, we saw things like Team USA, where a team with as much confidence as Los Angeles Gladiators has, DPay is always confident, OG is always extremely confident, Space, like these are really confident guys. They walk with a little bit of swagger and flair. When you start losing in a situation where you're going against somebody who has nothing to lose, they start to get like really motivated. They can smell the blood in the water, and suddenly even in the middle of the game, I assume you can have people thinking about like, oh God, like, this is going to look really bad if we lose. We can't lose. And you stop thinking about how to win and you just think about, how bad it is going to be lose. And then, if that's all you're thinking about is what's going to happen if you lose, well, surprise, surprise, you're going to lose.
It's like the race to lose to Shanghai season 1, where everyone was so worried about losing to Shanghai. Like it was a constant threat. Like if you were like, I would go to the player lounge and people would be hanging out before their matches and they'd be like, I don't want to lose to Shanghai today. And I'm like,
yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, no one was losing to Shanghai.
So many people have talked about Shanghai Dragons. One of the reasons that their loss streak was probably went for so long is because teams just absolutely refused to give Shanghai Dragons their first win and would prep harder for them than better opponents. And, like Boston's definitely not at the point, and they were not at the point where they were Shanghai Dragons level of bad. So you definitely could maybe have a little bit of arrogance where the Los Angeles Gladiators didn't properly prepare for them or didn't take them seriously.
Well, where do they stand now, do you think, Jane? Like I looked at Boston. No. Not well, yes, Gladiators, but that's a second point. Boston first. Let's go Boston first, because I've spent a lot of time dumping on Boston. A lot of time. Everyone has. Everyone has spent a lot of time dumping on Boston. But I'm also not going to, when they win against Gladiators, I'm going to give them credit for doing so. And they didn't look bad. They actually looked pretty good. Like at times, like it wasn't just Jerry and Myungbong popping off. It was actually looking like a team effort. Like they were having some good dives. They were actually having some coordinated ult usages. Like this was actually a team that looked almost mid-table when they were playing. Like this is an okay team. So is this Punk? Do you think this is an IGL situation? Like I look at it and I think Punk and the roster changes have maybe motivated them. But I also think that one person cannot turn a team around. So maybe Punk just fits in better with some of their existing column structure, because the one-man IGL is not a system that exists anymore in Overwatch. It's a bad system. It shouldn't exist in Overwatch anymore at this point, because that was back in 2016 when Wins was riding the cart as Lucio, just tweeting. Like that back then, you could have one person doing a shot calling, but now you can't. So I don't think only the addition of Punk has turned this team around. Like maybe in conjunction with some other changes.
What other changes would you even start to hypothesize about? I definitely think that Punk is a big improvement. I'm familiar with Mufin as a player. I'm familiar with Fusions as a player. As anybody, at the World Cup, like they had those communal practice areas, and no matter who you were scrimming, If you were scrimming against Team UK, you could hear Fusion shot calling and all of their plans. And even if you were scrimming somebody else, you could still know exactly what Team UK was doing in whatever their respective scrim was. So, Mufin is another individual who likes to do a lot of talking, a lot of micromanagement of his team, and those two kind of playstyles don't work together. Whereas Fusion and Punk do have pre-existing synergy. Like, they have duo on their streams multiple times before, and they looked really quite in sync today. Not today, just in their last match. So, maybe it's just a little bit of a better fit. Mufin was a pretty mechanically gifted player, certainly that, regardless of what happened. But, the player synergy is something that you can't ever disregard. And I do think that even if Punk isn't a massive improvement or the best over or off tank in the league, I think that him working with Fusions in this match could definitely be the spark of hope for Boston.
Maybe. I mean, and also sometimes getting someone that can just encourage everyone else to talk is very important, even if he's not doing all the calling himself. But overall, I think Punk is a change, but one person does not make a team. So,
No,
and when you look at the whole
not.
Boston roster playing, it definitely looked like a much better team. And also something to note, they only won one game mode during the match. It was Koth. Koth was the only thing that they won.
Ridiculous.
So there has to be something said there of like, first of all, I'm just saying that once again, Koth continues to be the worst game mode in Overwatch. Okay, everyone's gonna disagree with me, but I still think it is. I know people don't like 2CP, but Koth is inherently the worst, like one of the worst game modes in Overwatch.
Tell
I think.
Me why? I've not.
Well, just because whoever wins first fight has insane advantage.
Yeah. So just
and also they're generally poorly designed
first fight.
Just don't lose first fight.
Just don't lose. It's part of the game.
Lose first fight. Also, they generally are poor.
I mean, if the first
have
fight's
some of the worst map
put more emphasis on the first fight. It's not like it's 2CP.
I just don't like the map design for Koth as well because they have all the classic Overwatch. You can only enter through 2 different chokes, but the chokes are also surrounded with environmental hazards, and you also have to American Ninja Warrior yourself over the top and backflip, and like it's not fun to re-enter points either on Koth. That's why I don't like Koth that much. Obviously, it's still more fun to play, but something can be more fun to play while being objectively worse than another game mode, is my feel on it. So,
I wish we could. Can we, Logan, Mr. Producer, are you there? Can we run a poll?
A poll? Get a poll on Koth 2CP?
Which is the worst game mode, Koth or 2CP?
Koth or 2CP.
Okay, while we're getting off track, while our producer...
No, but I mean, so I think while they do that, so more importantly... So we both agree Boston didn't get changed by one addition. It just looks like a reinvigorated team for the most part. Like, because they had a lot of that talent there to begin with.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Gladiators then. I look at that match and I say I see a trend of Gladiators essentially not knowing how to play other than walking on top of the other team. Like, the Gladiators looked at their best when they were playing this Doomfist Zarya comp with Mirror, and they just face rolled into the enemy team repeatedly. That's when they look their strongest.
It was one of the things that I noticed when I was watching the Los Angeles Gladiators matches back is that they started to look way better in overtimes when they stopped caring and just like, everybody for themselves, just like they have to make it work at that point. Mirror's Doomfist is still great and they put a lot of resources into him, but you are right. And they tried that same kind of like aggressive walking over people strategy. And, once they got a little bit spooked and played way slower and way more passive, things just did not go their way. And I definitely don't see this as a trend. I definitely see this as a sharp departure from their usual form or power level, whatever you want to call it. And a part of me wants to hope that it's just because of the reasons we mentioned previously. They didn't properly prepare. They didn't take Boston seriously. As I don't think even if Gladiators had prepared, like, Boston would have seen a power increase. And there is going to be a part of this that Boston looked better just because, especially with the support lines in Bird Ring, the Gladiators did not look nearly as coordinated as they have previously. So I'm going to at least be optimistic about it and say that I'm going to chalk this one up to basically a mistake. Like, that week's a write-off. The Gladiators messed something up. It's out of character for them, and I don't see it as a downward trend. I just see it as kind of like a hiccup. It was an error. They can kind of be smacked and get just a little bit of a wake-up call. No, you can't do that. And they should hopefully get back to form, maybe with their tail between their legs, but hopefully with no less of that aggression. That style has worked for them before. It's kind of weird that the Gladiators are right now 4-5, ranked 12th in the league. That's much lower That's much lower than one would expect, but that's
Well, I mean, I actually am going the inverse, Jane, and I think this is a trend for them. I think
really.
that if you think about the roster as it's come forward, like if this roster had carried the momentum forward and involved as the season had gone on, I think they would still be rated very highly. But it was a gamble with their current roster because let's go through it. OG, very talented mechanical player,
Oh, I'm
wants to be
familiar
a
with
leader,
OG.
but also booms. Like, let's be real, he booms. And so Space, obviously, they're pretty well rounded. Nothing really to say about Space. Very good player, probably the best American off tank. Obviously, like a top, very top off tank. Then you also have Birdring, the definition of someone that is either on or off. Like
Yes, true.
Birdring is either pounding, just straight pounding, or he is non-existent off the radar, and sometimes can also and then and has his own issues with that, with stuff like that, and also previous physical injuries like his wrist and such like that. Then you have Shaz Big Goose, consistent, okay, and finally, if we talk about their final starter, Mirror, and Mirror is a complete unknown at the Overwatch League level,
I mean,
right?
he's feast or famine from what we've seen so
I think
far.
Mirror has some good moments. I think
He's
Mirror
good.
overall
Yeah.
has been about as consistent as Birdring, which is a bad thing, I think.
Yeah,
That's
I
not
mean,
necessarily a good thing.
We talked about this, I want to say like 10 episodes ago or something, like how one of the weaknesses of the Gladiators was the fact that they had two people when they played Mirror and Birdring that both acted like superstars and both required resources to be invested into them, right? So yeah, absolutely. Birdring is either on or off. Mirror is feast or famine.
And also, who knows how Mirror's mental is either? I've heard mixed reports, right, too. So it's it's a coaching effort there to make sure that the team, when you have historical mental explosions, to harness the explosive power of the mental and make it into a team that works. And on top of that, you have inexperienced players like Mirror, and you have inconsistent players, and you combine them together. And it's like a roster that I think that's why it makes sense. They've shown their most success early in the season with hyper aggressive comps that rely on just mechanical skill and going forward, is because that's really where you focus your aggression is just able to be focused, and you have one clear objective. You don't have any more complex style, right? There's not like, okay, we're poking, then we're pulling, then we're ulting, then we're recontesting. It's like, okay, we are pressing W, and I'm pressing W again, and then once more, and then once more W, and then perhaps a Q. And I think this is the problem for Gladiators, that it's a roster that's clearly not, I just don't think developed enough, and has some problem with inconsistencies, that when you go across multiple metas and you face teams that are also evolving, this is where their synergy problems are starting to have like a lot of issues, and the fact that they can't sometimes think more more three-dimensionally versus a one dimension of just this x axis. They have to think the XYZ. At least that's how I think.
It's absolutely plausible. Like the more I think about listening to you, it's like that could be possible. It's hard to really know the internal dynamics of it. From watching Mirror stream, he's sometimes toxic. More commonly than being toxic, he tilts. So he's definitely not the strongest mental player either. I guess I do have quite a bit of confidence in terms of like Deepay, Curry Shot, and Faustus, who are the three main coaches for the Los Angeles Gladiators. So I would like to think that even if these problems happen, they're temporary. But if you get to the point where like a rift develops between these players, like really, as long as the players kind of stick together and maintain a unified opponent, kind of the other team and not each other, then hopefully that's not something that affects them long term. But if any sort of like rift develops between the players, that could definitely sink this roster, and that would be a hard one to correct. So you make some great points, and I think the more I think about it, the more you could be right.
Yeah, so it's just a wait and see moment for Gladiators at this point. I think we have to say like this is not good if you're a Gladiators fan, but there's still data points to be made. And if you're a Boston fan, you can remain, for the 3 to 4 of you out there, you can remain hopeful and say like maybe this fixes, maybe this roster is going to come back. So I think like there is still a chance for Boston, because I also think Boston has some great talent on the roster. It's just getting it forward. But I actually think the real reason why Boston won was because Chipsa played. I think that's it. I think Chips is the lucky totem for the Boston Uprising.
How do you figure?
Well, because he played in Boston.
What wasn't the Boston Los Angeles game before the Fusion Titans game?
Yes, but that's besides the point.
Okay, We're just not going to listen to logic. Fantastic. Okay.
But that's besides the it's the indication of Chipsa playing. It's the it's that
Oh,
it's like the stock market, Jane, it's a stock market. It's like Chipsa playing, index funds up. All the funds stonks rising for Boston Uprising. Chipsa not playing, back to poo tier.
I understand. That's what we call the economy. That's what we call the economy.
That's the Boston Uprising Academy,
Yeah.
and it's fueled by Chipsa.
Yeah, man. So we finally have to talk about that one. And the Vancouver Titans, who was their first map against? It was Houston Outlaws, right? Even the Houston Outlaws disrespected the heck out of the Vancouver Titans. Like, I honestly feel pretty bad for the Vancouver Titans players. It's like they're not even really kind of the point where you can cheer for like the wholesome underdog. It's absolutely not the fault of the players that this has happened the way it has, but fans and even like you're either kind of making fun of the organization, or if you were a fan, if you were kind of like part of the crowd that really enjoyed the Runaway Story and their roster and the season 2 team, like you've got to be pretty resentful of the organization, especially seeing the performance of your team more recently. So they are,
I mean, it's a failure. I mean, right? It's a failure. Like, you take a beloved roster and it falls apart. I mean, and Summonsoo is literally like, I think there was like a tweet from him. It was like, yeah, I had an offer, but I turned it down because I thought I might get more offers, and now I'm drinking because I'm sad. Like, Summonsoo is descending into just
so sad
usage, essentially. But also, I have to say that's a bit of hubris from players in particular. Like,
yeah,
I think a lot of these I don't blame Titans players for maybe wanting to get out of the situation, especially if all these rumors between the org and management is definitely true. But as a player, and I had made this tweet earlier, it's like, one thing to remember is that we're in the midst of COVID, and esports are getting, and then there's Jane having a quick sneeze or a yawn, whichever one it may be, but we're in the midst of COVID. Orgs are not necessarily wanting to spend lots of money right now. And also in general, a general trend across the Overwatch League, in my view, and esports in general, honestly, is that budgets are clamping a bit.
Yes.
Budgets are clamping, especially for player salaries, which in my eyes were already rising to exponential levels that were kind of ridiculous at times, even if it was an established game, because of the ROI, the return on the investment for some of these player salaries. And so it's kind of silly to expect that you would be able to leave the Titans and immediately find a team. Like, it's just not, like, unless you're Jaehong, who is currently on break, and like pretty much unless you're someone that is like in a desperately needed position or a huge content creator and figure, you're likely not going to find a team. And sadly for someone like Summonsoo, he's not. He's neither of those. He's not a huge figure. He's competing for a role that a lot of people already have filled, and he's there's nothing that he does necessarily hugely better than a lot of the other current top teams in particular.
Yeah, even when the releases came out, the commentary was the fact that most of the teams that these players are going to want to join, like, none of the full Korean teams really had slots that would have made sense for these runaway players to actually kind of move in and take over, I guess.
I mean, maybe Spark, right? But like,
yeah.
Why would Spark pick Summonsoo over Architect? Obviously, they just picked up. Like, Architect does all the projectile classes way better than Summonsoo would, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So, like, as much as I hope for the Vancouver Titans individually to find a spot, some definitely will. If you were in the market for that at the right time, that's a huge blessing for you. But it's very unlikely that you're going to just upend a roster, especially if picking up a member of the Titans requires removing an active member, especially if you're kind of working on something like pre-existing synergy. There's always going to be that kind of lag time, and in the middle of COVID, trying to negotiate visas as well. Vancouver Titans being a Canadian team, they may not have American visas, so even transitioning to an American team is going to be extremely difficult, especially with the current political climate, is not to mention the pandemic. So yeah, it's a nasty situation for a lot of the former Titans players, but the current Titan players, I mean,
not doing well. I think we're fast approaching a potential, if there is not improvement, because everyone's assuming that the players are going to come in and, like, I'm sure they're hungry and they're happy to be in a chance, but the reality is, it's almost like being, it's not quite a scab, like at a picket line or whatever. Like, it's not really quite that equivalent. It's more of like if I had to go fight in the UFC ring because all the other fighters have been fired over contract disputes, essentially, and it's like, Avast, you are now going to fight like Conor McGregor in the ring. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be able to handle this. I don't
mean,
think I will win this fight.
If you were going to get paid as much as Conor McGregor would, you would probably do
But
that.
I'm not going to. There's no way.
Also probably do exactly what the Vancouver Titans have been doing and just trying to survive and holding on for dear life.
But the thing is that the difference is that still the scales would be equivalent. Like if I had to go out to the UFC ring and get my ass kicked for huge piles of money, I would consider it, right? I would be like, okay, that's fair. But the Titans are going out and getting probably beat down repeatedly for a minimum Overwatch League salary. Like,
I mean, I bet you that minimum was higher than whatever the hell they were being paid before.
Yeah, it was. But also, there's still the effort of like, so what does the rep look like afterwards, right? Because I already brought up the allusions to like, well, obviously a tier 2 would never beat Overwatch League teams now because this is so many second win players, but like ignoring that this is a mix of tier 2 players,
it's not a tier 2 team. It's tier 2 players that were just like mixed mashed together. They're
now, sure, I still have my own doubts about that, right? Like I really do doubt how many tier 2 teams would actually do that well. But the purpose of this is the fact that like it is really hurting the players' chances. Because when I look at this, I'm like, I'm watching these matches and I'm watching Suna die repeatedly in every Ashe duel because he has 150 ping. I'm like, if I was a less intelligent person, I would be like, wow, Suna blows. Like, get this guy off the stage without realizing.
If you were a smooth brain, you might make those comments.
So I think that's where we have to talk about for Titans. Is just like, does this team get better from here? Was this even do you even think it was worthwhile for the Titans players to even agree to this? I would assume probably yes, but
yeah, I mean, if anything, if nothing else, they gain a lot of experience really quickly. You don't really learn any faster than just getting the shit beat out of you. So like,
well, there is a limit, right? It's like there is a limit to how bad you can get beat
as long as you don't get demotivated, right? As long as you can keep a smile on your face and maybe laugh at your misfortune and continue to actually kind of look at the VODs and continuously try and improve it. And we have no idea about the mental state or the morale of the Vancouver Titans. Now, when you're looking at a map like Rialto, there's definitely a lot of fights where the Vancouver Titans, almost entire maps, right? Where the Vancouver Titans kind of just wants it to be over. They move so slowly. Their tempo is a molasses rate. They will try compositions over and over and over again and never swap. Playing what the meta is. And I always kind of got on teams' cases where teams would kind of just always want to reduce the amount of criticism against them by just playing what's meta. So one of the criticisms against them wouldn't be that they're like playing stupid comps or something, but so it's kind of like, yeah, the Vancouver Titans is playing what's meta, or they're mirroring their opponents, but they're just kind of like going through the motions of walking forward and dying and be like, oh no, we lost. Like there doesn't really seem to be a lot of life in the Titans. So I can understand that getting beat a lot is not very motivational, but at this point it's you've been called to rise to the challenge. You're being paid. You made it to the big leagues. This is assumably what you were going to work for. It's not going to be a perfect situation. Not everybody is going to be Carpe. Not everyone is going to be on a tier 1 team, and you have to put up with those realities really if you want to succeed. So props to them for getting their shot, but if they manage to actually do something with this just horrific situation for them, then maybe that's all the better
sign, right?
For proof of
because
them as a player.
If you pick up a few wins, then it's much more likely you might stick around if you have a good attitude. So like, there's nothing you could do about that. I mean, I wonder how people felt for the players that got picked into Shanghai at the end of season 1, right? You were coming into the worst team in esports history, and you're like Fearless and Auto and such like that, and like what the situation is, and Fearless now is on Shanghai Dragons currently, and is considered one of the best main tanks, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, if you get picked up to play for Shanghai Dragons season 2 after that horrific season, aren't you kind of like, now I can be the person who shows off that I can make this team a winning team, and it's like not like we can get worse. I'm not going to be the one blamed if this team loses every single game because it was already like that before me. It's one of those things. It's like back to the Los Angeles Gladiators versus the Boston Uprising sort of thing. The Los Angeles Gladiators, they have a reputation to expect. People expect results of them, and those kind of crushed expectations are what really hurts. But the Boston Uprising, there were no expectations for them to win. They were, there's with nothing to lose, and now Boston Uprising fans are absolutely delighted about this. It's like, the 2-10 Boston fans are way happier than the 4-5 Gladiators are fans. So, it's I think that this is very much a situation where there's enough going on to catch the flack that the players can't really be blamed for. The organization is being blamed, the ping is being blamed, the pandemic's being, like, all these things are being blamed. Even if the players show the littlest bit of improvement or progress, I think that alone is good. Like, they don't need
That's
to
enough.
win the Overwatch League. It's going to be enough, and I definitely think that that's kind of the challenge given to them. It's like, I really like the fact that Albert, the GM of the Florida Mayhem, when he was on the podcast, he talked about the goal for the Florida Mayhem being to bat 500, just win 50% of their games. And I really liked that because, like, of all the head coaches and GMs that I've talked to, almost all of them have said that it's like, I think we can be a top tier team or a championship team. And I've always pressed them for it. I was like, do you really think that? And then,
So the inverse is like, you're happy that Albert's like, we can be an okay team. We can be all right.
Yeah, I think that shows a lot of, I don't want to use the word maturity, but I think that it shows, like, good kind of realism, I suppose. So yeah, it's like, it is kind of weird to see people kind of just like not like ignoring the truth of the situation, be like, oh, they need to be a championship team, or like,
Yeah.
we need to be a championship. It's
I
like,
would imagine
there
I
can
would
only
hope
be
that
one
the Titans
championship team.
management isn't walking into this being like, yeah, new Titans, you guys have to set the world on fire, or else I hope, because if that's the case, then that org is irredeemable.
I mean, maybe at this point the Titans would just be happy to spend less money. Like, who knows?
Yeah, which I think is a big portion of it. Also, we haven't talked that much about it. We give a hint, but Chipsa played for the Fusion.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit before, and you have very strong opinions on Chipsa. I also have some opinions on Chipsa that aren't as strong, but I also think, I'm going to tell you my straight up opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think Chipsa did shit in that match. I'm
Okay.
going to tell you, I don't think Chipsa did shit in that match.
Okay, so like in a map that they went 99 to 99 on, right? So it was like as close as a control map could be, and then they hold the Vancouver Titans full hold 70 meters on Rialto. It's like, meh, but no, it's like, Chipsa got some frags, and of course he had that.
He did all right.
He did all right.
know,
It's
he
like
did
you're
fine.
being supported by 5 members of the best team in the league. I would hope you're gonna do all right. It's like, unless you actively make the rest of your team worse, you should do okay. Sort of.
Yeah.
things.
And also, he was playing the composition that he should get supported the most on, which is he was
Yeah.
playing that Zarya comp a lot, where he got bubbled, he got healed, he got packed.
That was
like-
that was very clearly, like, it was fan service. It's absolutely what it was. It didn't matter. It's like, even on Rialto, like 2 members of the Philadelphia Fusion would die first, and the Titans wouldn't push, and then Saddle would dive the back line, kill 2, Primal kill a 3rd. Like, they probably
could have been
could've-
worse. Could have been worse for Chipsa, I think.
Oh
Could've
yeah,
been
like,
better.
I think that they're doing
So-
great for Chips, and I think that the Overwatch League viewership jumped
Like
crazy amount.
20,000
It
or
was like-
something.
Yeah, I think it was like 15 or 16,000 viewers, but like, good for everyone involved. It worked out.
Yeah, it worked
Fantastic.
out.
We don't have a tier 2 scene, but yeah, it was a great match.
Yeah,
so-
we don't have a tier 2 scene, but that's okay because Chipsa has absorbed the energy for tier 2, and he
Yeah.
will be your representative now.
fantastic. No, like,
Chipsa's the tier 2 rep.
good on him. Like, a lot of the things that like, Chipsa was really a lightning rod for a lot of my frustrations and resentments toward, like, Blizzard and the Overwatch League and the tier 2 scene and things like that. So, I don't want it to kind of come across as that I have anything against Chipsa. I'm certainly not pleased about the situation. Not like the way that he played. It's like, today is like, good on him. Congratulations for playing pro. But like, the situation, it's like, but that's past. People don't want to hear me bitch. It's like, people can enjoy the moment, enjoy the memes, enjoy the game, sort of thing. But
it's still valid criticisms, overall.
yeah, but
of,
nobody
like,
cares.
Nobody cares. Yeah, that's true. No one cares at this point.
No one cares
Yeah.
about my criticisms. Nobody cares about the things that I cared about in those regards. Like, Blizzard is finally doing some kind of like token efforts to correct those sort of things. But like, the tier 2 scene devolved. It doesn't exist anymore, at least in North America. Sort of.
I think it'd be
thing.
more
So,
dissolved at that point. It would be
Yeah.
like, do we have devolved? Would it go back a step? Dissolved, I think it's
yeah,
just
it's,
a
it's kind of
ooze.
like it's like, yay, I was right. You're stand in the. It's like, it doesn't matter. So
I got a little peeved. That's an aside. I'm just gonna go on a little mini rant. I got a little peeved at Flame, who's a viewer on my companion stream a lot, who I like Flame, but he was like, he had this rant on Twitch where he's talking about all of his time at Houston or whatever, and he somehow implied that like our content is somehow as biased as like Plat Chat. who are literal Overwatch League employees.
Yeah,
When I
saw
literally
that comment.
when I literally turned down an Overwatch League offer to go not be associated with it so
Yeah.
I could make content and be third party. So I'm not obviously it wasn't like that big of a deal, but I was like, come on, Flame. Like, really, dude? Like, come on, bro. Like, I bring you on the stream and you'll call me biased. Like, like what is that? Like,
We
what is
haven't
that?
even really said many nice things. about the
I
field.
think all we've done is been like, so I feel like a lot of times we get, now we're gonna get started. Now the rant's gonna get started. So like I feel like the worst we've done is like we are just not unreasonably negative. Like
Yeah.
I could tell for certain people, including Flame, there was a clear like, I'm done. I'm out. Esports Overwatch League, you can suck it. I'm gone. I'm gonna burn all the bridges on my way out too. And I'm like, that's fine. You're perfectly allowed to do that. Like, whatever. But also, just because I can still give all these criticisms, like I don't like I much preferred, like, I wanted to change all these Overwatch League formats earlier to more of a tournament system. I hated how Team 4 and Blizzard have done the iterative hero design process for hero pools. The tier 2 scene is disgustingly mismanaged, and all this other, as someone that has personally worked in tier 2 as a contenders caster, like, it is disgustingly mismanaged, and there's no money there, and there's no hope. Like, it is a disaster.
Yeah.
But like, the point here is like, I can still acknowledge all these problems without like looking at anything Overwatch League related and being like, this is heinous beyond belief, and it offends my eyeballs, and I shall blind myself like Oedipus. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, this is all one of the reasons that we are operating under the NVTV banner and not part of Dallas Fuel or anything like that. Like, not only does it prevent us from being kind of, that conflict of interest. Of course, we're still arm's length sort of thing, but being a part of a separate legal organization as well just allows us to speak freely without any sort of agreements getting in the way of that. So, we are in a position where we are able to, and do, I believe. I think we fairly criticize the Overwatch
Yeah,
League.
like, we're just not overly negative. That's the difference. It's like, I feel like a lot of the criticism and like why like people on Reddit would cheer when they hear something that's like, this guy said something that craps on Overwatch League. Yes, he's so smart. He's so smart. Like, I'm just like, okay, like, and like 100%, we will be negative when there's mean to be negative, and we have been negative. We have 100% not always been positive, but like, there's still also, we can still look for things that are done right, or at least not fully negative, and so be like, okay, I like this, or like, I like Overwatch. I dare say this brave opinion about this without being crazy. It's not like I'm somehow gonna get like a bunch of. It's not like Blizzard or like contact me every time. It's like, the money's deposited in your bank account for that. It's there, like, it's right there. It's like, no.
I will say though, are you on the content creator Discord with Jeff Kaplan?
I am. Yes.
Oh,
I am.
you are? I'm actually not.
Wow, get rolled. Get rolled.
Yeah, so but anyway.
But that was besides the point. It's like, overall, glad Chips have played. I like the marketing strategy. He could have been a lot worse. Played okay.
Yeah.
Like, Titans, best of luck Titans, and we hope to see some improvement, or else just a little bit of improvement, or else that's kind of irredeemable for the roster. And moving aside to new roster changes, Spark. Yes. Spark has changed a little bit. They've added Architect now that Bozzy's retired, probably to go to Valorant, from all things that seems likely.
So. Yeah.
Because I think that's probably a game that might suit him a little bit more. And they've also released Assistant Coach. Yeah. But they also then said, Shane, that they're not going to participate in the month because of Gushway's
is that
issues.
Official yet?
I don't think it's official, but it's like, I think this is something we should talk about because it's so close.
Yes.
And just the implication of it.
Because it was like 14 hours ago or something that I saw that the rumor came out that there's a problem with Gushway's visa, and the Hwangjo Spark have apparently applied for a 2-week departure, I guess, from the league while they get that sorted out. So I don't think that's official. It hasn't come from an official source as far as I'm aware. Chat, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, that's the rumor right now. And this is kind of a little bit of an interesting one, that the fact that Hwangjo Spark would actually go that far to try and withdraw from the league for like 2 weeks, not only because it would remove them from the May tournament, but additionally because the Overwatch League just came out with the ability for teams to sign 14-day contracts. So even if Gushway was having visa issues, it's entirely possible for the Huangzhou Spark to sign a substitute or a replacement just for the 14 days? Is it so bad that they don't even want to kind of risk having a poor showing and they'd rather have no showing? You know, there is special prize money. Like there's extra prize money. Each and every single win in the May tournament provides money except for the Toronto Vancouver match, just because that one's, I guess, a meme. But it's a definitely, if true, a weird situation for them to pull out. You know, if it was like other teams certainly have played way fewer, or sorry, they have not played for longer periods of time than 2 weeks. You know, I think the Vancouver Titans didn't play for over a month. We had where Shanghai Dragons, for example, weren't originally scheduled to play until week 11. Like we've had large gaps before. I think the only reason this is kind of a problem or a question is because of the May tournament.
Yeah, and people are also adding us in chat saying like the reason they can't do the 40-day contracts is they're not at risk of going below the league minimum, like a certain amount, like 6 players. But then it begs into question, like that's like sure, that's a cool, nice stopgap that 14-day contracts fill. But then instead is like, how have Spark allowed it to get to this point to where they're going to like this is something they clearly had to have known, you know?
I completely skipped over the part of it, like how the hell do you miss a visa
how does that
renewal?
happen? Like, right? Like, how are we at the point where nothing has been done to where you're just not going to play in the tournament change? That's pretty big because also the whole point of this May tournament, in addition, is that it's, in my view, sort of a test to move to potential CDL style format, or like a testing the waters to see how is this received by the public. And if one of your entire franchises is absent because you didn't pay attention to a visa problem, like, or you just said like, it's fine, we won't play, like it's just going to be a break. Like I struggle to see the logic behind that, which leads me to believe there must be more to it, or else this is swiftly getting into an Adamas esports training facility situation again. If there's not more to
it's going to remain an Adamas esports training facility thing where we don't know the inside story. Like there's zero reason or possibility that the Huangzhou Spark are going to put out even a press release about visa issues or something like that. You know, this is going to probably remain the realm of rumors. You know, we'll definitely see this weekend if Guxue actually does show up to play, or if the Spark show up to play at all, sort of thing. But yeah, so. What do you think about the Architect transfer over to the Spark? Because he's replacing Adora and is going to become Godsby's new partner. So,
wasn't it? Is it? Yeah. I mean, I think Architect is really good. It's the first thing.
Controversial opinion.
And he's playing with his old Check Six, you know, or X6 members. You know, I think that.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, that's a big reunion for them. But I think it's a good move overall. I think it's great. I also, it's very clear that Architect probably wasn't getting the play time that a player of his caliber was worth on Shock, which is not a problem for Shock necessarily, because like it's more of a problem with the fact they have too many players that are too good. And now they recently added Twilight. So
that is quite the problem to have.
So their roster has only gotten scarier at points.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's a good overall move, and I think it's moves that are perfectly fine, but also redirects us once again into this fate of like, if let's say if Godsby or Adora like or not Godsby, but Bazzi and Adora like hadn't left, would Architect have ever been traded? Would he just sat on a bench? Like, I think it's one of those problems that we run into with Overwatch League where we have the ability to have large benches, and large benches should have been a good tool heading into a season filled with travel, just because of like various sickness or fatigue, burnout and stuff like that. But now we're back to a situation we ran into in season 1 and 2 where teams have these larger rosters, and it's hard to easily facilitate playing them across, especially now that hero pools are changing the system so much and you want to keep pieces as consistent as possible. It's like now we're into a situation, now we're back to permabench players. We're back to players that we don't ever see. We're back to players like, which is never the ideal.
Having players play flex support.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, so yeah, that's a little bit of a unique Shock situation too. But the point of like, it's also just not ideal. I think any situation where you have players that are talented players in particular, like this is very different than like, let's say myself in season 1 or some other player in season 1 being benched for a really long time. Like Architect was a proven member that was really, really good. And I don't even think he was alone, because there was vast swaths of time we didn't see Fury, who was considered like the best player, the best off-tank player in the league at points. So I do think that like the sub issue in this season is unfortunate, because we probably would have been in a year that we've seen the most variety for rosters rotations, I think, ever, simply because of the travel. And now we've just reverted back into like, well, there's no point to play a lot of these players a lot. And even teams like Atlanta, who's tried, I think, relatively hard to rotate, and even Gladiators, who gave Paintbrush a shot, and has had some good success with rotating DPS players and players. It's like you swiftly realize that it's tough to rotate players effectively and get consistent practice, especially with hero pools, without having a literal physical reason to do so, like fatigue or sickness.
And I think one of the reasons why people were considering these larger rosters also was because of the amount of homestands. Having a team that could, travel, or having a team that's stuck more at home, something like that. They're being able to be more resilient to people maybe having kind of sickness or fatigue or jet lag during a match if somebody wasn't feeling 100%. I think there was also more merit to it before the pandemic shut everything down. So that's another thing that could have biased it in the other direction of what we're seeing now.
Yeah, it could have changed. I mean, it could have changed. I mean, and as your opinion, as someone that has actually been in a coaching environment, do you think? What is your opinion on this whole like? Because I think some teams suffer from it, especially Atlanta. But that's just a Brad Rajani like thing. Is he does a lot of rotations.
Mhm.
Do you prefer to have a core group of 6 players that rotate in and out? Like, would you think that's superior, or would you always the opinion that maybe you should be giving everyone sort of play time and increase their value, or make them like players that have certain map picks or certain just hero picks that they come into play for?
I think that having two operational rosters is too much logistics, and it's just too unstable. If you have one person drop out, the person who's A team or B team, respectively, they can't just easily transition because the team is going to play differently. I do think that it's important to have at least one substitute for each one of your roles. So I would think that an ideal size personally is 9. And I think that my answer might be a little bit weird, but I think that it's important to be able to threaten to bench players who are acting like petulant children.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
A player who is like knows that they have no replacement is
they have no
dangerous.
fear. They have no
It's
fear
dangerous.
of actually just inting. Because it has happened. Everyone thinks Overwatch League players are not mature adults always.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter the age. It is 100% a fact. I have heard many of stories. I've personally experienced it. And there is plenty of times where Overwatch League players will just act out because
I would read a book of just player drama stories from the Overwatch League. That would be a fun book to read. It would be very cathartic, I think.
It would be not. I really want to have like a they just released the Michael Jordan documentary, but like we have a separate documentary, but it's like of all the beefs that had happened, or like throughout all the years. Like honestly, that would be a great piece of content, is just to have all these beefs, but some of them wouldn't be.
There are also just some like really funny stories from Overwatch League professionals who have never lived on their own before, and just like the absolute disasters that causes when they're just living on, like, not a team house or anything, but they're completely living on their own. Like, I heard the story of one of the apartments in California actually having to get just written off, which is just so funny to me.
Written off?
Yeah,
like they just said, like, this is condemned. Do not go.
Yeah, they had to like condemn it and completely renovate the entire thing because it was basically destroyed. So
wow.
Yeah, that's like things get pretty fucking crazy. XQCs, no.
XQCs was gross, but it wasn't that bad. Like, it wasn't enough to where you had to like destroy the apartment. Like, I heard similar things for other like. I heard similar things like for I'll give a team. Actually no, probably not a team example because then we get too.
No,
close,
you definitely don't want to touch
like,
teams.
Pretty much. Well, I mean, I could say that there is definitely plenty of stories of players being disgusting slobs and the apartments being so bad that they must be cleansed with fire. Like an unholy abomination.
And to be fair, like, I don't want to categorize all Overwatch League professionals like this. Like, there is a group of people in the Overwatch League who are very mature, very professional. It was kind of funny, but there was this like all the people who I would consider like the more professional side of the Overwatch League, when they were all in California, they would have regular soccer games, which is pretty cool. They all picked a time and went and played soccer together. So it's not like the entire league's like that. You certainly have some people.
Well, that was Boston did that as well.
Boston primarily, but a lot of people from other teams joined them. Yeah.
I honestly, I didn't like soccer. Huck forced us to play. We didn't force us to play soccer, but he highly encouraged we play soccer, and I fucking hated soccer, guys. I didn't. I didn't like soccer. It was also when I was like oldavast and far more out of shape. So it was like a lot worse for me too.
Now you're jacked.
No, not quite jacked, I'd say, but
what have you been doing during this quarantine?
Well, gyms are closed, dude. I can only run. I can only
mean,
run. So you can't get jacked from running.
All right, I was gonna say, doesn't your apartment have stairs? But
I
no,
don't live in an apartment.
You don't live in an apartment.
Nah.
Oh, that's what I've been doing for exercise. Is that there's a stairwell right next to my apartment, so I've just been doing stairs up and down. Oh, but
Well, that's sort of like our roster, all of our roster hilarity, and like maybe at some point we can get Envy we can make a documentary, Jane, of like the filthiest apartments in Overwatch.
I want to do the kind of documentary where it's like deep voice, where we record people but like black their face out and pitch their voice down.
Oh yeah, so it's anonymous.
So they can tell the most. Like some of the stories that I've heard from people secondhand, like I won't even dare allude to. Like it gets so crazy, man. Someday.
Yes.
Someday. But
it would someday. But we have to get the mailbag because we've gone
mailbag because we missed it last week.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had some good ones fly on through here for the mailbag because you guys had some questions. We sort of left it open again, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
are they edging so hard about this juice?
I want to tell.
I mean, because does it really? I mean, does it really matter to say someone couldn't clean their room properly? I don't know. Is that like a problem?
No, of course not. That's why I said that one. It's the ones that I can't even refer to.
I mean, like, I'll tell you that Kalios on Boston was so bad that at one point he came to me and he said, "How do I get a professional cleaning service to come and fix my apartment?" And Mistakes lived with him at the time, and it was like, and Mistakes wouldn't even go out to the common area. He would just stay. He would come through, pass through the main area, and then go into his room and close the door because like there was like flies and food scraps everywhere. The drain was completely blocked. There was rubbish like all over the entire main area. It was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And like, it was just the worst. It was just the worst. That was my own personal horror story, but there were definitely other ones too. I couldn't even, I entered the apartment and I was physically repulsed. I was just like, I walked in and it looked like something from like a Resident Evil game. And I was like, okay, bye. And I like closed the door behind me afterwards because Callius was like, can you help me with the apartment? I'm like, you need a priest. I can't help you with this apartment. Like, there's no hope here.
Okay, I'm going to refer to a story that I've only heard of secondhand. So this is not a firsthand story. Could be true, could be not true. And at some point in Overwatch history, I will make no mention, whether it was during the Overwatch League, pre-Overwatch League, or anything, but I heard a rumor of players getting held hostage at one point. Have you heard that story?
Hostage in what way?
Man.
Like an actual hostage situation? I've heard some interesting run-ins of the law pre-Overwatch League and during Overwatch League, but never hostage situation.
Yeah, it's
I never heard that.
Hopefully somebody knows the story and shares, but that one's probably like one of the craziest that I've heard. So not firsthand though, not a firsthand story.
See, so maybe it could get out of control fast. Maybe one day we'll.
I hope somebody has kind of like firsthand knowledge of that and can share the story because the last thing
no one's gonna say who's gonna if the story hasn't been told to this point. Like that's the thing. But also, I'm not pressuring you to tell it. I'm just saying.
I'm not. Yeah.
I'm just saying that like no one's gonna tell. But there are definitely plenty of good stories there. But mailbag time. What questions do we should we go over here? We have a few. Is this the name of a commenter? Where are the galactic civilizations?
That's a fantastic name.
Or is this a question about the Fermi paradox? Okay. This is the name of the commenter. Where are the galactic civilizations? Well, okay. I thought this was he was like the great filter, huh? I don't know, but let's go on. So he asked I think this is about, because we left it pretty open, guys. So this is about the topic of tutorials in Overwatch and saying, I think that some main tank fundamental tutorials are sorely needed for new players. No other FPS game has main tanks. I've seen way too many lower level players who think Rein standing still, just holding up shield is the right play all the time.
I mean, like,
you know, I don't necessarily, I do think the concept of taking space as a main tank and managing shield could be more properly explained. Sure. But also you'd expect people to sort of like that's one of those things where like maybe this is a bias as like a former player, but it's like you would hope that your brain would recognize standing still and getting shot is not the optimal way to play the game, you know?
I mean, at some point though, like, the fact that the shield can be shot through sort of thing, and it does give your, I can definitely see where that confusion comes in. But that's where we kind of talked about, um, we talked about it last week with the tutorial topic. I assume that's what this is more or less in response to, and the
Yeah,
fact
the
where
tutorial topic.
you have this massive difference in skill of people joining your game. You're going to have people, especially in a game like Overwatch, that's as large as it is. They're going to have people who come in that it's their very first FPS. This like Overwatch was my first person shooter. I played MMOs beforehand. Um, and then you're also going to have people who transfer over with like thousands of hours of TF2. So even though there's kind of like no main tank in TF2, you're going to understand a team-based action FPS a lot better than somebody who's never played an FPS before, or maybe it's just one of their early video games or something like that. So I think that the tutorial systems, like really in-depth tutorial systems, when you get to the point where you're trying to teach people about these very specific things, it's going to either become not relevant to large enough of the demographic, or it's going to become so overwhelming with so much information that the people who need the information are never going to find it. However, like just recently, the Blizzard sponsored 2 videos with your Overwatch and CarQ. So it's posted on the actual Play Overwatch website, but the videos themselves are on YouTube under CarQ and Ryan's channels. And like they were actually sponsored to create them. And I think that, even just kind of like making the link, which is, I think, something that we talked about last week. So it's kind of weird to see Blizzard do it like a week later. Not to say that it was because we talked about it that they implemented it, as much as that would be awesome. Yeah, it's like, they are trying to kind of move into the very large amount of content, which is easily indexable and searchable and already, well presented. And it's basically outsourcing, right? You're outsourcing the tutorial to content creators.
Yeah. I mean, and I do understand that tank as a concept is very different in an FPS game than like an MMO. Like obviously if you're from another Blizzard game and you're like, I play tank in WoW, so I must take all the damage and everyone must shoot me for my team to succeed. And I get the concepts are divergent. And so there probably can be some explanation there, and there definitely can be explanation for newer players, 100%. But it's just one of those things where it's hard for you to really, I think it's hard for people to, I think, sometimes grasp like those concepts because they seem so bare minimum. But I mean, obviously, if there's a great demand for it, then sure, why not?
Yeah. I think just fun fact: RCK was actually rank 1 in WoW Battlegrounds.
Oh, I did not know that actually.
Yeah, so he's a
I
former
play
WoW
Prot Rhine. Well, okay, let's look at another question, huh?
I'll get the next one. So the next one's from Alex Thomas, and he says, "What are your thoughts on low skill heroes in competitive? I personally love playing Tracer, Ana, Zarya, and Rhine, but get frustrated when I have players who one-trick what I call a cheap hero. They make it into my mid-diamond games, not on the merit of game sense, mechanical skills, or resource management, but on exploiting a cheap and broken hero. A perfect example of this would be Mei? I assume it just says me, but I'm going to assume that he just misspelled me.
Probably, maybe he is the broken hero.
He's broken.
He is the new hero that's releasing before Overwatch 2. We've heard it.
It continues. He says, I seem to have hit a wall with my Tracer and couldn't get past 3.2k. So I picked up Reaper and now I am in low masters. Literally no skill. I just press W when I see text. It's disheartened as I spent hundreds of hours learning all the intricacies of Tracers, watched countless hours of Kavaji, Defran, even Logix back in the day to learn her, where someone could play a brain-dead hero like Reaper and be the much higher rank. I know there are skills required for every hero, but I refuse to accept a BAP shooting the floor aimlessly and pressing E requires the same amount of skill as learning how to insta-pulse bomb or land sleep darts. I personally think competitive should only include high-skill heroes. What would be your thoughts?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say that ranked doesn't really care about whatever skills you believe are relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like communication, a skill, teamwork, a skill, resource management.
I also don't think that I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna be real. Is that I tend to agree with like the concept of like it's obviously a lot easier to climb with Mei, like playing Mei and stuff like that because. But I think the main reason for that has nothing to do with them being high skill.
Yes.
honestly.
I think there's very much a situation where like there's two sides to this. There's the heroes that are unfun to play against, and then that's very different from overpowered. And then you have characters who are overpowered or meta. The meta characters are just going to be statistically more powerful. If you have all the character or the people who play that, overall you have a 53% chance to win on this hero, a meta hero, as opposed to a non-meta hero, let's say Tracer, because she hasn't been meta, recently at least. Uh, Whereas, she might sit at like a 48% win rate. But when you are, I love the backronym for meta, where it's like most effective tactics available. That's not really where meta came from, but it's a very, very useful backronym for the word. And I think that
Who
really,
who says that? Who says that?
it's
Do
useful.
do people say that?
Yeah.
Well, okay, well,
It,
that's
w- it
news to
was
me.
it was a way to define meta for people who had no idea what meta really meant. Because apparently, anyway, so I think
Okay.
so it's not actually an acronym. It's actually a word. But for people who don't understand that, it's a very, very simple way to explain it. Okay, you guys, I teach in my history. I have taught a lot of people who are very new to video games and have no idea what meta is, and that
That's fair.
explanation
That's fair.
that explanation works the best out of any other explanation. Um, but it's like what I read from this, right, is that the person who's submitting to this wants to be successful, high rank, but doing it their way. They want to be able to, be proud of their skill, mechanical skill, the really true mastery of that hero. But mastery of a hero and improvement of your mechanics is a separate skill from the skill of actually ranking up and being good at the game as a whole. So just because you've decided to improve on one set of skills and the Maya player has decided to improve on a different set of skills, even if those skills are easier to master, if they're more effective, then they're going to be the more effective player at actually winning games. So it's the fact that like you have different goals than the other player, basically, and that's why you're not happy, but nobody cares, right? It's like,
Yeah. And also if the heroes are so easy, why doesn't everyone just play them and get to top 500? You
yes,
know?
one of the easiest ways to kind of realize how not broken a character is to play them yourself, unless it's pre-nerf Brig, in which case that was
But also the thing is, I don't disagree. It's like, yes, I would tend to agree the mechanics of Reaper and May are far less punishing to learn than any other hero.
yeah.
But also, I think as a player, part of your improvement as a player should be, I mean, it depends on your goals, right? Like obviously, if you're a casual player and you're just looking to climb, play the rank ladder and play it your way, like you have very different goals, right? But part of that, even if you just want to be a casual player and looking to get good on ladder, is that recognizing, especially for a game like Overwatch, is recognizing hero interactions and advantages and disadvantages.
Mhm.
And so in general, so for example, I feel like this might be a problem in lower ranks. Is like in lower ranks, when a team actually puts together a semi meta tank and support comp, and then your DPS players are playing like Trace or Genji, it's probably really hard to win the game.
Yes, it's going to
Okay.
be very difficult.
But if you realize that if you play some Reaper and some Mei and realize the strengths of those characters, then you can be like, wait, I can actually win more games now
Yeah.
and then I could play the characters I want when they're not playing those tanks. But when they swap over to they're like stronger tanks, as in like, let's say Orisa Sigma or Orisa Diva, then you're like, okay, I need to swap to these heroes. So part of this is not just recognizing like, yes, these characters may be unfun, sure, for you, but also even just the act of playing them makes you a better player at every level, especially the casual level, because then you realize how everything is supposed to interact in Overwatch and what is good and what is bad.
And conversely, playing Tracer is going to develop those mechanical skills, and it's not like that mastery is lost when you play other characters. Like your aim is going to get better playing a high accuracy hero than a character like Mei or Reaper that doesn't require as high of accuracy, ignoring the right clicks. But those skills, it's like riding a bike. You don't lose those skills; you retain them. So if you do go from a high mechanical skill hero to one that doesn't require that, you should theoretically still be at an advantage, and it will teach you more about the game. And I had one other point, but I've completely. Oh yeah, and then the other thing is that not everybody in the game has transferable skills, which will make them very good. And like lower skill heroes like Moira and Mercy are going to allow more people an introduction to the game. And these heroes that have lower mechanical skill, I think, are important, just for the health and long-term longevity of the game itself. So don't expect everybody to kind of be playing by your games or be at your level.
Hmm. I mean, I tend to disagree with that. I think there should be introductory characters, but it shouldn't be like at the cost of like. But also, once again, it's just a different philosophy, right? Because it's like if this was Valorant and we introduced a character that was very non-FPS centric, like Moira, people would be very upset, right? But
That
also,
would
we should.
not fit in Valorant.
But also, Overwatch isn't Valorant, right? Like Overwatch is
Yeah.
not a tactical shooter, so I guess it just depends on what
to be
extent you think it
specific,
is.
I'm talking about low mechanical skills. Like, if you're going to be a successful Mercy or a successful Moira, you need a lot of skills that do not come from mechanics. It's not that the
Yeah.
heroes themselves require no skill, it's that their mechanical skill is lower.
Yeah.
You can't argue against that.
And also, I think an interesting comment to adjust, to sort of look at was that someone said, "Well, Tracer could teach you a lot of necessity of movement and controlling space and such, but Reaper can just do it way better," which is actually not at all. They literally are not even dissimilar at all. Like
Nope.
Tracer,
Wrong.
sure, it could teach you about movement, but and so can Reaper. They can both be movement oriented, but Tracer has never really ever been the character that like you're shredding tanks with, while Reaper does. In addition, Reaper is not the one that's going to the backline and taking duels. You can, but and also Reaper's not the one cleaning up fights, while Tracer can too. Like the very different the characters are not even remotely really the same. Like you can achieve similar goals, but there are very different actual objectives with both character and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And you can argue that maybe Reaper can do a lot of things better to the point where Tracer's strengths aren't as good as Reaper's strengths, which is fair. That is correct. But to argue that just because a character is currently more meta and inherently they do everything better or the same as another character is not really correct at all, and belies that you don't really have like that's where you can grow as a player, is realizing that yes, a character is really good and I'm going to play it all the time because it's good, but you like also then can recognize like winner type, like let's say the meta shifts and Reaper's poo and then Tracer's god tier, but then it's like now you're like, okay, like now I can be good, now I can know how to swap and I take the lessons I've learned and I can play Tracer. So
Let's do one more question. I think we're still. It's Tuesday though. We're allowed to go over. We had the Reddit thread, which was posted by Homebound11. The top comment on
Yeah.
this one is by Polly Baggins. Also, I see you getting shit talked in chat.
yeah, I see that. People like to tell me how to speak, and I'm like, well, why aren't you guys getting paid to speak, huh?
True. Okay, Polly Baggins says, how does Jane and Invest feel in regards to Overwatch 2 and its release, specifically in the space of competitive balance? It feels like Blizzard aren't keeping on top of balance as it is now. Interesting. 2-2 and HP introduction, although this could also be due to more effort being put on Overwatch 2's development. However, if we are expecting a bunch of new heroes to be released with Overwatch 2, how can we expect Blizzard to even have things remotely balanced when it seems like every time they introduce just one hero, things seem to break? And by extension on that balance, we've only seen Push as a game mode for one weekend of streams when Overwatch 2 first was announced and nothing since. Could it be the next 2CP that teams rage about? Maybe they will Thanos snap many aspects of the entire roster. Would Jane or Avast support something like that at Overwatch's release?
So pretty much what I'm getting from now that I'm actually physically reading this comment,
I'm going to come in with a little bit of a hot take sort of thing.
okay.
I don't think introducing new maps, game modes, or heroes improves inherently the competitive experience.
Are you saying specifically game modes, not heroes, just game modes?
Well, maps, game modes, and heroes. You can have like if this is more of the same sort of thing. It's more variety. It doesn't actually improve the competitive experience as a whole. Bye, Avast. It was nice knowing you. He's gone.
Oh, I'm back. I was like, frozen. I was like, am I frozen or is Jane frozen? But like, it was me. So your argument is, adding variety doesn't make the game better, pretty much, and like
doesn't make the competitive experience better.
Yeah, doesn't make the competitive experience better.
Okay. Almost provably, the introduction of new heroes has made it worse, and there's been maps that have been bad, and even if we consider King of the Hill or 2CP to be bad game modes, I think the argument is the weakest for the introduction of game modes. If the game mode being introduced is more fun, more enjoyable than the average of the game modes, sure, that might improve it. But especially on the introduction of maps and heroes, I really don't think it improves the competitive experience. The things that would improve the competitive experience are things like, restrictions on six stacks and solar duo queues and top 500s, this sort of thing, where, you're improving queue times or having team-based ladders or things of that variety, things that are actually kind of systemic about the competitive experience. Those are the things that, when I'm thinking about what would require for me to really enjoy Overwatch again, those are the kind of things that I would like to see. A new hero isn't going to change the environment in which that hero is played.
Yeah, I'd tend to agree with you with game modes. But I think heroes are kind of at this new heroes at this point are kind of a baseline necessary experience to improve Overwatch as a product. New heroes
Yeah, certainly.
because
Not arguing that at all.
because at this point, like not just adding the variety, because it's not just about the variety at this point. It's also something we've discussed previously about how there are certain heroes that only one hero does one thing and no other hero does it different. No other hero
Yes.
does anything remotely similar. So I do think there is a certain need for new heroes to break the monopoly. Essentially, the monopoly. Any like you know, what am I going to make like a pretty much the monopoly of force. There's some sort of political
That is a
doctrine
good
wrapped up in
term.
there.
That is a
Some sort
good
of
term.
there's some sort of political doctrine. I can't remember what it is, but it's like the social contract or something like that. Status versus not. I can't remember, but like that like Orisa or May have on their respective roles. So we
Yeah.
need
Or
to
Diva.
have more heroes in we need to have some more heroes that fill those roles. But I would say
Mhm.
that if they're implemented poorly, obviously it doesn't improve the experience. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if it gets to the point like we come to the argument of like, so we can either add no new heroes and we sort of sit at where we're at, or we can add new heroes and we possibly change it. So like it's
Yeah.
sort of like once again an argument of like, sure, things maybe don't improve, but it's sort of required
Yeah.
for it to eventually happen.
The improvement again, just I see more people in chat asking me kind of like, what else do I mean if we're talking about improving the competitive experience? I think replays were a great example of something that improved the competitive experience. The ability to rewatch not only your games, but the perspectives of other people's games. That was huge. I already mentioned it, but team-based or group-based ladders. A Clash-like system from League of Legends where you could have different in-client tournaments. Things of that variety. Like those are the kind of improvements to the competitive experience that I want to see. I understand the business case and the necessity of them releasing new heroes and maps for hype, and the fact that quality of life improvements rarely get that same player interest. We
So
had
you'd like more systemic changes,
I
less
think
so than like product changes.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's what the competitive side of Overwatch really needs. The casual side is doing great. Overwatch 2, as far as we know, is going to be focused on the casual side of things. It's not going to be the same competitiveness. It's more like it's just. I'm not going to kind of go over each and everything that we know about
Yeah.
Overwatch 2, but almost all of them are based around a much more casual experience. And heroes themselves, they change the competitive. By a vast, he's gone again. But yeah, it's just that I think that the systemic changes are more important, and I have no indication that more are coming. So it's kind of just like when I see a new hero, it's like, yay, fun. But it's like, just starting like Echo came out, it's like, okay, I'm not super interested in learning a new hero just to, you know, be able to know it. And it's like, when I'm a more a competitive player, I'm more interested in, the meta, just doing whatever is necessary to win. So yeah, that's my
Yeah,
opinion on the matter.
I could tend to think like I honestly think we sometimes get into a binary as well. A lot of internet discussion in general, and especially video game discussion, which is filled with some of the most infantile arguing, is like we get into a binary system of like we need this and not this, but like why can't we have both? Like
Developer hours, right?
developer, yeah, it's true. Developer hours always we always forget about dev hours into that, but
Yeah.
also it's like I
And there's
also think there are other disconnects here between just
yeah.
dev hours and other
And
things.
we don't
right?
know that we don't know Blizzard's internal. We don't know their budget. It's not the easiest thing to just like hire new developers in order to do a project that's time critical and then fire all of them. Like organizations and large corporations like Blizzard simply aren't that flexible. So changes that might seem minor or not actually affect the bottom line or anything like that are going to simply be deemed less relevant. It's reality. It's not the perfect ideal world that I'd like to see, but that's okay. People are going to enjoy the new heroes. Hopefully they'll enjoy the new maps, and hopefully the new game mode makes things fresh for a little while or sort of things. But at least for me, I'll say it one more time. I think that systemic improvements are the ones that are sorely needed, and I don't think will be coming with Overwatch 2.
Well, that we're pretty much out of time,
We
by the
are.
way, and also my internet is slowly starting to perish. I'm getting a guy out here to hopefully take a look at it, so hopefully we can fix this because I've had issues. But that's gonna be it for us today in Contested. We are gonna be back obviously on Thursday. Especially we're gonna do a lot of preview with looking at the May tournament that week, upcoming weekend. So I think we need to put a mailbag question. I think we can maybe put out several, but I think the most obvious one is who is your front runner to win the May tournament and
Yeah.
why, chat?
And why? What do you think of the
And
tournament?
why?
And who do you think's gonna win it?
Oh yeah, and then also on top of that, I think we have Chipsa. Someone said Chipsa, and I also want to add maybe a more
We
general question
also
on
have
top of that.
Chipsa. Nice. What's the more
May
general
tournament.
question?
I'm sure there's a more general question we can add into this. Maybe. Let's see. You know what?
Do you
Here's a great
think-
one. Should we have heroes that are sort of like Moira and Mercy in a game like Overwatch that allows for a player to have an introduction into the space of Overwatch and as sort of the FPS mechanics, especially if you're a first FPS time player, or should that not really be necessary at all and we should treat it as much more of a very sharp learning curve? That's our second more general question as well. And answer whichever one as you please for both of those.
Okay. Well, that's all for today's episode. It's Tuesday. That was your Tuesday episode of Contested. Crazy how that works. To all of you watching on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, I hope you enjoyed today's show. As always, we watch your comments during the show. Even you Twitter folk. I saw actually quite a few of you guys today. So hello to you. Hope you enjoyed.
Oh, people are asking where they answer, by the way. Jane, where do they answer for these?
Oh, so you answer the mailbag primarily in the comments on YouTube. That's the primary place that we look. But recently, fans have also been posting threads for the mailbag on the competitive Overwatch subreddit. So if somebody does that, I don't think we're doing it, but it seems to be kind of a way that fans have been using to respond to mailbags, but also selecting which questions that they want to have answered. So primary place to submit your mailbag responses is in the comment section of the video on YouTube, which will go up tomorrow. But if you don't want to wait for that, look for a thread. Homebound11 or Homeboy has been posting those threads after every episode for the last couple of weeks. So thank you to him. But yes, to anyone watching on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you are listening pre-recorded on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I also hope you enjoyed today's show. I'm Jane, this is Avast, and this has been Contested.